screen.
Recording is on.
Okay. Hello for the later watchers there in the camera recording. Let me share my screen here. Okay.
Yes, I can see it.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, first of all, let me also activate the Q&A links, so you are able to.
You can also click on the camera, and then we see your face as well.
True. Go back and activate. You can see me.
There you are.
All
Great.
good now?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so I guess you can also see the link for the silence for the questions. Sorry. So yeah, well, excited to be here. As I said before, thank you everyone for joining. Also, thank you, Adrian, for taking the time to organize this meetup. Let's try to have some Android conversation. So I named the talk, "Hey, is Uncle Bob wearing a jetpack?" I guess at least some of you know who Uncle Bob is or have heard of him a little bit. He's basically the reference when it comes to solid principles or clean architecture in software development. And the Jetpack side is, the name Google chose to give to this set of modern tools they delivered recently to ease Android development. So I wanted to share a little bit of the experiences we had as a team delivering or developing a software, taking into consideration both the good practices for general development and also the part of Android, right? And how these two worlds collide together. So that's the area of the talk. A little bit about me. For those who don't know me, I'm Rafa. There you have my Twitter account. I'm an Android developer. I started developing Android quite time ago, like in 2012. I've worked mainly for Android or with Android, better said, apart from some experiences with cross-platform technologies, React Native and Flutter, basically. But yeah, the main goal the main scope of my career has always been Android. I've been working on 2 different companies in Germany, and since a couple of years, I came back to Spain. And here I am in Malaga, sunny weather back. So yeah, happy here. Right now I'm working at Sync, as we also mentioned, the squad here. We are a group of 3 developers now, developing the Android platform. Sync is a company that is building the next generation of online banking. We are putting a lot of effort and love in our native applications to deliver cool features into the banking world. We are releasing soon, so stay tuned. And you will probably hear from us soon. A little bit about the agenda. Since I didn't know how many people will show up, and probably it happened that we are all from different backgrounds. We all have different expertise levels. So I wanted to align a little bit all of us, bringing all together on the same page in terms of architecture. So we'll start with a brief introduction to what it means or what principles we are trying to follow at Sync in terms of clean architecture. Then we will go on to Jetpack. I will go through the list of tools that we are using from this toolset by Google. And then the main blocks of the presentations, that will be how we are dealing with 2 worlds. And navigation has also a special chapter because it's a special topic for us as well. And later on at the end, I will just wrap up and tell you a little bit of the plans that we have for the near future. Okay, so just a little bit of context. We started also Sync some months ago, so we were lucky to start a new project from scratch. That's why we also were lucky to be able to make all these decisions based on what we understand as good principles. So we didn't have to deal with any legacy code or anything like that. So it's been an exciting project to work on. So that's what enabled me being here today talking about this. So let's jump into the first main topic, which is the architecture. Yeah, if you probably have heard sometime the word clean architecture or any other name that it has, people also refer to it as onion architecture for obvious reasons. As you see, software is organized into several layers, and that's what onion comes from. Yeah, clean architecture, domain-driven design as well. Some people refer to that, and even a cool name that I've heard at some point, which is a screaming architecture, that relates to the topic that you should put your effort and your main focus on your domain. And every time you open a project, what you should be seeing is, okay, this is a banking application or this is a traveling application, rather than just this is an Android or this is an iOS application. So leaving the framework a little bit aside and putting the main focus on your architecture and your mindset into what it is that you are building. Okay, so if you've heard any of these terms, you probably are also familiar with this diagram, which is the main point to explain anything that has to do with it. It's just a diagram, but it represents a lot of things. Let me turn on the pointer here so you see where I'm pointing. So basically, you set up your core, which is the layer circle. Okay, so the layers in the center of the circle are like your domain, are your core of your application, and those are the things that are less subject to change. Let's say if you are developing a banking application, like in our case, then you should have there the entities that you are gonna play with. And the farther you go outside the circle, the more implementation detail you go. So in the outer layer, you have the views or the data sources, things that are framework dependent and that are implementation details, as the name says. You can maybe switch one to another. You can change. Let's say at the beginning, you want to iterate fast, and you have the data from a text file. Then you put something in place like a database, and later on you also add some network layer with caching or a cache system. You can adapt your outer layers, but then your core shouldn't be affected by that. So you hide all those implementation details from your core. To enable this, a very important part of this mindset is these arrows here. Those represent the dependency rule. And as you see, they point always inwards into the center of the circle. So you cannot reference from the domain anything that is outside that, because that means if you later on change something here, you will probably have to update the domain, and then everything doesn't make sense what I was just saying, right? So yeah, basically that's the main or overview of the principles that we try to follow in the clean architecture. We don't have, in our case, we don't have these layers as you see here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 layers. If we go to a diagram that is a little bit closer to what we have in our current application, it's something like this. We have 2 different layers. The inner layer, we call it the domain layer, okay? And there you are to find like the entities, use cases, and the repositories. And then we have the view layer, okay, but yeah, just to simplify, we call it view layer. But you also find the API client, preferences, anything that has to do with some dependency that is very specific, we leave it there, and we try to abstract our domain from that. So for our AI client, we're using retrofit, but we theoretically go crazy tomorrow and say, no more retrofit, let's do async task for all our network call. It will be fine. Our domain just will sit somewhere, and that will be fine as well. I forgot to add fragments, but fragments are also an important part from the view layer that we are currently using. On top of this, we have our feature modules, which if we were to represent that, would look something like this. Okay, that would be a feature. And then, as you see, it's transversal to both layers, so it has a layer inside the view and a part inside the domain layer. That leaves us with, as you can imagine, a lot of modules, okay, because you can and every one of them has two different modules for view and one for domain. So yeah, disclaimer: there are advantages and disadvantages with these too many modules, but so far I'd say we're dealing with it quite okay. The domain modules are poor Kotlin. They don't know anything about Android. They are completely agnostic to the platform, and that's kind of the setup that we have in our code base. If we would zoom in a little bit into this rectangle here, that's what you would see. You would see this dotted line dividing the view layer and the domain. Okay, I chose open banking as a feature. Okay, open banking is basically a feature that we are integrating also in our application that enables the user to join and link other accounts that he or she has in a different bank, and she can or he can operate with accounts within our application. So that's called open banking as a feature. And then we have the domain, separated layers. And here you see, for example, we have fragment. This fragment will talk to our view model, stay inside the view layer, and then it will jump to the use case, executing some operation. In this case, get the open banking information, and it will probably talk to open banking account, identity, and so on and so forth, right? You might be wondering how this use case is able to get the information without talking to the API client, because the API client is above the line. You know, above the line is like a black box for the domain layer. We can do this thanks to the interfaces. So we define the interfaces in the domain layer, and the use cases talk to the interfaces. And the use cases don't really care how the interface is implemented, be retrofit or be whatever. From the API client, then we can implement this interface because the arrows can point down, as you see here, and we're good to go. So yeah, basically this is an example of our features. As you see, all the arrows are pointing from view to domain or within their own layer, which is fun. So we have special modules on top of this mix of modules. We have some of them. These are our special modules, so to speak. Base domain. This module is where we define things like the abstract class for the use cases, for example, where we deal with routines, context switching, or we define the result class, being it a fail, because every use case when invoked can deliver a success or a failure. Those things that are widely used among all the domain modules are defined here, which placed here right in the middle of the diagram. And then on the view layer, we have two different modules that are kind of special. The base Android module, which can be seen as a library. Basically, it contains things like theming or very common string resources that are being used by any module, and it can be referenced as a library, right, where the common things are placed. And on the other side, we have the app, with the entry point to our application, and where we define things like navigation, anything that has to do with communicating between these feature modules that we have. I didn't mention it, but we're using regular feature modules. No, they are not dynamic feature modules, right? That's why we can do this. Otherwise, as you may know, the dynamic feature modules can reference the app and not the other way around, but we're using just regular and traditional feature modules, so to speak. Okay, so that's all about the theoretical part of the clean architecture principles that we are following. This is the list of tools that we use for our application from Jetpack. As I said, we had the chance to, and that's the phone in my house calling, sorry. But yeah, we carry on. So yeah, those are the things in live data, data binding, navigation component, or architecture components and motion layout. Those things are the things we use over there. And now I'm gonna jump in our way, how we bring all these cool things together to enable us to follow all the implementations, all the principles that I outlined before. So our way of doing this, we rely heavily on live data for the communication between fragment and view model, basically. Here you have an example. From this point on, I'm gonna be showing off code snippets. This one. So the upper part will be our code in a fragment. Okay, we have this abstract class, a method subscribe view model, and within that we are able to get the view observables, which is in this case open banking cards in this case, and we observe, giving it the view cycle owner, and every time this value is updated, we deliver the new value to the adapter. Okay, so this is as easy as it gets. You don't need to, thanks to live data and Jetpack, you don't need to care about subscriptions, saving them somehow and then disposing. You just ask the view lifecycle owner and you're good to go. And in the lower part, you have the live data observable itself. We have this differentiation between private and public variables to try not to expose mutable objects beyond the needed scope. So yeah, we need to write those three lines every time we need a new observable. And as you probably are as lazy as we are, as developers, we wrote a live template, it's called. In our studio, Android Studio, it basically writes those three lines for us. So we have we can save some keystrokes as we like. This is how we would execute a use case inside a view model. and then grab the result of the view model of the use case, sorry, and deliver it through an observable. As you see, it's a very simple code. Thanks to live data, it doesn't get too complex. We use this Android custom scopes. I remember the nice talk from Olmo, where he explained a lot of things regarding the scope and context for coroutines. So we are using that. We launch every use case within the view model scope. That means if the view model for some reason gets disposed, the coroutine is not going to be hanging around, it's going to be canceled. We override also the operator invoke, and then we invoke the use case and we check if it's a success. We just post a value to the we post the value to the live data, and we're good to go. We also check for failures, but for presentation purposes, I left that out. But yeah, you can also do something in case this is a failure. You post to a different observable or do whatever your requirements tell you to do. So live data event, this is a utility class that I also found useful and worth sharing here. As you know, the live data works in a way like it holds a value, and every time a new observer comes and subscribes himself to this value, to this live data, it will receive the update, right? But sometimes that's not quite you want. You may have the case where you are just displaying a pop-up or navigating somewhere, and that's kind of an event that once it's consumed, it doesn't make any sense to keep it there to being reobserved by the next observer, right? In case a configuration change happens, you don't need to navigate again or redisplay the same pop-up or the same notification. So this is the class that we are using. We expose these live data events, and as soon as it's consumed, it's dismissed. This is basically copy-pasted from a blog post by some people at Google, not from us, but I thought it's worth also sharing with you guys. Okay, other topic, model mapping. This is an interesting one. Given all these different modules and these dependency rules and all those that I explained at the beginning, we deal with some challenges regarding model mapping. I'll try to walk you through an example so it might be clear for you. Let's say we have a class in our API client module defining all the JSON annotations and everything that your backend is delivering, okay? And then you need probably this information from your backend to perform some business operation, right? Your domain logic needs to access this. But as you may recall from the beginning, that's not possible. You cannot access your API module from your domain. So you need your own model inside your business module, sorry. That's what you can use to perform your operations and so on. But then comes the question, where can we switch from one model to the other? Well, sometimes it's as easy as this. We just add a method there to map it, because from the API there is a problem. Here you see both your own model and your domain model, so you can add this kind of mapping. Sometimes it gets trickier, and you have to write your own mapper or your class if it contains some logic. And it is not as easy as one-to-one mapping. And then you can also use this model in your view, if that case, because not always it is ready to use. In your view, you might also have some extra requirements depending on theming or depending on user language, something that is context related, so to speak. then you need some extra information, and then you will probably also need an extra model in your view layer, and you need to map this model to your view model. So if we dive deep into this circumstance, I have here an example of our actual application. If you see here, this is one account, and depending on what you chooses to see, if it's the national information or international, you will display labels and fields. Okay, like we have the account number, or the IBAN, sort code or BIC, and then different information here. So that's where you think, okay, probably I will need some model in my view layer to cover this scenario. That's what we thought. We came up with this model. In this case, we have the product ID label and the product ID for the first field, this one here, and then bank ID label and bank ID for the second. Okay, and in a similar way as the API model, you could see the API, your model in your API and your domain. From you, it happens the same. From the outer layer, you can see your own model and the model inside the domain layer. So that's the place to map your objects, right, in the outer layer always. So given a mode, which will be national or international, and given a context, we have the product will be, in this case, the model inside the domain. We are able to create the product ID info view and use it in our view. How we do this is also a good opportunity for me to share how we are using the transformations on live data. Okay, display mode is national or international, and this is view model code. Okay, this is to be found in the view model. And also a live data, and then we have the product ID info view will be created every time the mode changes. So if the mode changes, this transformation map will be triggered, and then we call the static method from the previous model that I showed, and we give it the product, we give the current mode that is chosen, and we give the context. We're able to go to our string resources, get the proper labels, get everything, and set the model ready to go. How we are going to access this model from our views using data binding. Just as example, the same example is as simple as this. We have the live data observable inside the view model. We have access to the view model in our XML file, and we leave it. We access the corresponding field of that object. I left the constraints out, but this is code that you are likely to find in our code base. This is how our layout files look like. We have the objective, and then we use the data binding for both directions. When some UI event happens, we call the corresponding method for the view model, and we're able to subscribe to the live data inside the view model and adjust our layout according to that. We try not to complicate things here, but it's kind of the logic that you would put in a fragment. You move it. We try to move it to the data binding, but no more logic, because then you can lose some testability of your code. Something also interesting and worth mentioning data binding is the custom binding adapters. This is a little example where we use this thing to tweak our UI. Let's say we have these requirements like smaller decimal, smaller currency symbol, special styling for this word. Those kind of things. We put a lot of effort in the UX in our application, and those details are important. And we try to move it to the custom binding adapters here. For example, here we have all currency formatter, and here a lot of UI logic here. Okay, so over to testing. Maybe not the most popular topic among developers and software community, but still worth mentioning. How we are testing all these things that I told, right? Basically, as you may imagine, we have 2 points where the main logic is: view model and use cases, and that's where our efforts in testing fail. Basically, also in some mapping, some object mapping, if it's tricky, as I said, and it requires its custom mapping, then we might also write a test for that. But mainly we are focusing on view model and use cases. I just share a couple of snippets as well from those. This is view model testing. As simple as this, we that when some UI event happens, like an unbound clicked, then we insert something on a live data. This live data is emitting live data events, so that's why we have to consume it to be able. And the second one, we use run blocking test for the coroutine and as async tasks or async code, sorry. And a wait value is an extension function that we use for testing the transformation. Remember this transformation map that I showed for live data? We use this extension function because we need to await value, and yeah, that's. I'm happy to share it later with any of you what is inside. I didn't include a snippet of that one, but yeah, ask me if you're interested. No problem on that. The other key part is the use case. Here, our subject case, we execute it with our invoke operator. And for example, this will be testing that when logout happens, very simple test. We use test the mock with double K framework. So far, I'd say we are quite happy with the result. Very straightforward and simple API, and it covers all the cases, all the needs that we had so far. So I would recommend it for anyone. Okay, so navigation. This is a special chapter, as I said at the beginning, because we had some ongoing discussions for some time. We use navigation component. We use the plugin Jetpack to be able to navigate with safe types for the other. And we had two requirements. It had to work with this modular setup that we have, and we wanted it to be isolated, meaning, yeah, do not spread in all our modules with a heavy dependency on navigation. And actually, we succeeded, I'd say. My colleague Ale, I think he's over there, and he did a great job on this. So I encourage him to give a talk on navigation because he could talk about this for hours and is far more knowledgeable than I am. But basically, this is how we ended up navigating. Our friends are injected an interface. Okay, so they don't know anything about, in every feature module, they don't know anything about navigation component. They just talk to the interfaces to navigate. This is an example of an interface. You navigate to some other place and you pass, as you see here, comment. Okay, this is where SafeArts was really helpful. And given this interface, that's all a fragment needs to know to be able to navigate. Then in our app module, remember this special module that I mentioned, which is app. There it's where the dependency to the navigation component is. And this navigator who indexes all the interfaces in the different modules. You see, as you saw, the app module knows about the other modules, so it's able to implement those and then just leverage the methods given by navigation component, like nav arcs or find nav controller and a lot of things. We have subgraphs. We have different navigators to implement the different navigations within different subgraphs. So as I said, a lot of things to talk about, and yeah, this is just a very broad grasp or overview to what we are doing on navigation. Yeah, coming soon, we have some leftovers from Jetpack that we will be also looking into in the next future. Basically, there are room for offline support, pagination, and also flow for stream consumption. And together with coroutines, I've seen some examples, and they look great. So that's something we will for sure look into. Yeah, I think we're ready to wrap up a little bit. The takeaways, if I have to give some, as I said, there's no. It's not like I'm the guru here. I'm here to tell you I found the solution for all the architectural problems. But at least I will share some experiences that we had, our team. Basically, the main one was about forgetting a little bit the framework, right? Because sometimes we enter a new technology and a new journey to the Android world. You open the studio, you become this assistant. Okay, let's start a new project, and it gives you an activity, and then you start coding into the activity. But maybe that's not ideal because it doesn't scale too much. So I like to think about like changing a little bit the mindset, and starting with your domain, with your problem, like a banking application, whatever, and then using the framework on your benefit, right? And then using the Android preferences or the Android animation framework to build a full UI. But that's like a tool to use, not the main driver of your software development. And the other one is treat your architecture as a living object. There are no silver bullets. There are no one-for-all solutions. You always have to make some compromise and bring into the balance if it makes sense for you. If you're in a long-term application with a lot of requirements and you want it to be scalable, or is it just an MVP and you're going for the fast iteration path? It all comes down to it depends on your use case. For sure, I advise you to be as flexible as you can because things are more than likely to change software. So the less coupled you are to a framework, I'd say it's the better. So yeah, final word. We are hiring. As I will already said, we're looking for new Android members in our team. Happy to hear from you. I'm available. You can drop me an email, add me on LinkedIn, or contact me through Twitter or whatever. And we will be happy to have a talk about Android and software development. So thank you for your attention. I hope you're still there. It's like talking to me for an hour or something, but that was it.
I'm still here for sure, and I think everybody is still here. So
Thank you.
thank you very much, Rafa. That was a great talk. I really liked how you broke it down in like an introduction and going then into the different details. And also, I could relate to many things you were saying, even though I'm not an expert in Android. But a lot of things are easily transferable to iOS apps. So I think it's very valuable even for iOS developers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think last time I checked, there was a question. You guys and you folks can write on the what's the page called? Well, the slides Q&A page, and you can find the link in the chat here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we will get to that in a moment.
Let me reshare it in the chat, maybe. So far, there are no questions, but
so Rafaela was saying that the connection might have a problem. So Here's
But
a
now
go ahead.
the connection problem was when Rafa was sharing the screen, but now it gets better. Yeah.
Awesome. So, well, one cool thing about this system is that everybody can check the quality of their connection. So if you take the tile view somewhere in your UI, you will see all the little boxes of all the participants. And then when you hover over one of them, then you see the quality of the connection. So you can hover over yourself and see if it's green or not. So that's a cool feature. Okay, so I would like to carry on with the program now, and I will be asking Rafa a few questions, and then we will open up to all of you guys. Of course, you will have the chance to jump in and turn on your camera if you want and ask directly, or if you prefer, you can type on the Q&A screen, whatever is suitable for you. So first, a little bit of hello.
Okay, now you're back. Yeah, you were cut off.
I don't want to be. I don't want to be praising for the sake of praising, but I've had a sneak peek at the Sync app, and I know Ricky, and it's a really compelling app. I must say, it's full of features. It has an exquisite UI, so I'm sure you have lots of little details like the one you were showing with the pound signs a little bit slower than the rest of the text. I'm sure you have lots of those little arrangements because the app is really very, very well planned and very well designed. So that's great. And also, I think it's worth mentioning that you said at the beginning is a no legacy code to build on top of, right? And that I think that's in a way can be intimidating, but at the same time, it's also a great opportunity, right?
Sure, that's challenging because there is no one else to blame. If something goes wrong, you gotta say, "Well, who wrote this code? It was probably you."
Totally.
So, but at the same time, yeah, you learn a lot. Like actually, along my career, I've had this opportunity several times. Even back then, when I was in Germany working for Trivago, they decided to build the application completely from scratch up and get rid of all the legacy code, and that was also a good lesson because we had already by that point millions of users, and we had to live with two apps living together, and yeah, that was also a good lesson. But yeah, that's also an upside that you have all the freedom at the beginning to define things, and that's what I value the most, like being able to define things and also keeping them flexible, as I said, because you never know if Jetpack now is going to change, or if you should be as agnostic to the framework as you can to remain that flexibility.
Right. Yeah, I think you gave a great explanation about the dependency rule and the different layers, and you also gave some practical insights. Like you said, this is how we arrange it, which is kind of an interpretation of that in architecture. So that's great. So my first question that I had for you is that there is a lot of concepts into getting that architecture right and knowing where everything belongs and knowing where are the allowed ways to communicate between the different entities. So let's say you have a newcomer in your team, and you said you're hiring, right? And it's a junior developer. So how would you ramp up this person into the code base, and how would you when would you be comfortable having this person, touching anywhere?
Sure. So, yeah, first of all, I'd like to give this person an introduction to what the code base looks like, because I know there are millions of different approaches, and this is just one more, right? So this person, even if he is not junior, he can be senior, but he has been working with different architecture, different principles. So, but first of all, the general introduction to the things, and later on, just I'd say put in a lot of care in reviewing the code, because I'm not a believer of, okay, this kind of developer becomes this kind of tasks until he is or she is senior. Anyone can do anything, just with more help or less help. Be clear about it. If you need help, just shout and ask, okay, how do you normally do this? As a newcomer, is completely fine to have those kind of questions, and just integrate him as part of the team, so he feels also able to ask for help and also deliver feedback, because always having a new point of view is good. So maybe he contributes, and he says, okay, why don't we do this on this way? And either you find that your way is actually the way to go, or he has a point, and then you need to adapt. So a lot of communication is basic, and trust as well. So those are main things that I'd say are the need.
Sounds amazing, and actually, I think it is how it should be in our industry. So I'm really pleased that you guys are approaching it like that, because sometimes it's different, right? Sometimes some people are, they don't get trust, and they always end up doing the stuff that nobody else wants to do, or the stuff that the architect or the senior developer doesn't want to do. So I totally agree that that's the best way. So everybody listening, that would be a very good environment to work and to learn and to grow.
Yeah. I mean, it's in the team's benefit that a new joiner becomes productive as soon as possible. It's the investment that you give into that is paying back 100 times. So definitely, I agree with you there.
Yeah, I think code review is a very good practice to also explain things and discuss things and so on. Sometimes I get the feeling that everybody quotes the big names like Uncle Bob and or clean architecture because he's fashionable and it's kind of a buzzword. But then at the same time, when you dig deeper, we're doing clean architecture. Oh, do you have tests? Oh, we don't have tests. And it's like, wait a minute. I mean, one of the points of having a good architecture is to have tests. But still, a lot of people say they do architecture, but then they don't do testing. What do you think about this?
Yeah. I get the point, because I've also seen this, and I agree with you. Yeah, it depends, because some people just say, okay, let's do dependency injection, and then it brings a lot of overhead, especially in the lately time in Android. Dagger is not easy to put in place, especially if you have a lot of modules like we do. So it's a lot of overhead, and you need to be very aware of what you're winning with this, right? And one of the main benefits is testability. And I am not also a fan like, okay, we do clean architecture and we are the clean architecture company and so on, because it's all about, how do you say, you can do one approach to clean architecture and then someone else can do another approach. But at the end, these common principles are normally everywhere to find. And as long as you think about your code base, your specific development cycle, and what makes sense to you, and you try to gain some benefit from your architecture, because investing into architecture is a price you have to pay. You at the beginning, you spend more time developing features, you spend more time setting up the ground base of your application. But then if you, for the long-term analysis, that you are probably going to benefit from it. But you need to be able to also to justify or reason that to other people, so they know what the development team is doing and why is this taking longer, and what is it about our application that makes it robust, and you can fix bugs more in a faster way. So yeah, it's a long discussion there. Yeah.
That's great. I really like that you mentioned that it's an investment. So because it doesn't come for free. It doesn't come for free to do the kind of work you just presented. It takes a lot of thought. Sometimes you have to try something out. It doesn't work. You throw it away. There was a tweet thread recently exactly about that, which is about sometimes you have to throw away code because you try an idea, and the only way to really be sure about your idea is to try it out. And then maybe you figured out that that's not what you need, and then you throw it away, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But I think there needs to be a clear communication and clear expectations about that. So I'm really glad you said that.
Yeah, and the company has to have also an understanding for that, because you cannot have it both ways, fast and good, right? Because we can deliver an application with all the features, but then if it breaks, we don't know what broke. If we want to change something, let's take another 2 months for do that. So yeah, communication, as you said, is also quite important for that. Yeah.
So about the jetpack set of tools, and you showed a bullet list where you said some of the modules you were using. Can you cherry pick these things? Let's say a viewer is watching this talk, and they say, "Oh, do I need to change everything to adopt jetpack, or can I just pick different components?"
No, definitely you can choose different components. You can choose to use live data and don't use navigation component, for example, to your navigation. What I would suggest for sure is to migrate to Android X instead of the support libraries, because that was kind of a nightmare that even Google found out that developers were suffering a lot with backwards compatibility with support libraries. So Android X, I'd say, is either support libraries or Android X. But once you're on Android X, you can choose as you please, and you can do things step by step as well, depending on the size of your code base, of course.
Okay, very cool. So I had another question, which is we had Olmo here, who is also in the session. He talked about coroutines, and he gave examples. You can check it in the repo resources, which I linked to in the chat here in the session. And I was wondering, can you mix and match what he explained about the coroutines with what you were saying, or how would that work?
Yeah, I gave some hints also during the presentation where we're using the coroutines. Basically, yeah, the presentation by Olmo, I learned a lot there, and I started, I think, short after using coroutines, and they are basically a solution for async code. So they match perfectly. As I said, our use cases, for example, are using by default background thread. So we use coroutines there. Like every use case would be a suspending function. That means it's in the suspend, in the async world of these coroutines. And we have these tools given by Google, like view model scope, which is basically, okay, you don't need to care about canceling coroutines or anything else. You just launch a coroutine within this scope, and then they will be just dismissed as the view model is dismissed. So that's quite cool. If you want to go deeper and have some custom async code, then you will have to know a little bit more about coroutines, like creating your own context or overriding or putting in place your own error handling. But as a new joiner, the ramp up time for coroutines is pretty acceptable. Like you can get started with very, very little knowledge on that.
Okay, amazing, cool. So I'm not so sure about the Android world. Would you say that MVP and MVVM are the dominant architectures, or?
More MVVM right now. Since this launched by Google, I think it was 2 years ago or something like that, that they released these architectural components, okay? Because before that, they didn't care actually about architecture, so everyone was kind of building their own solution. And still, we are kind of that, but at least they gave us like the guidelines, and they created these view model objects that you can extend, and they also help in the creation and in the handling of the view models, because yeah, lifecycle on Android is quite a topic, and it was easier. Now it's a little bit more difficult to make mistakes in terms of leaking things and leaving things around that are not no longer used. But yeah, definitely MVVM. I'd say right now is the standard. We use it in the view layer. Yeah.
Okay. So that's great, because then a person using MVVM in their Android app, could they adapt what you described today?
Yeah, probably if they just use MVVM, what they will have is just a code base, which is basically all part of the view layer, so to speak. So depending on Android, and every module is depending on Android, you can choose. You can leave also your use cases inside Android. That doesn't hurt, because you can have that dependency, but it would mean basically take a little bit of responsibility and a little bit of code from your view model and extract it to the use case, so it is more reusable. So I'd say that would be the first step into doing that, and later on also having this use case, instead of talking directly to API clients and so on, which probably people are doing as well. Abstract that and hide those implementation details behind the interfaces, and you would be in the path to what we have right now.
Awesome. Okay, I just have one more question. I want to leave ample time for all the attendees to get to you. So my last questions would be like, you've been in Germany and you've been in different companies. Now we have here students and junior developers. What advice would you give them in terms of career planning and in terms of maybe going abroad, not going abroad, what kind of job to look for, a little bit of career inspiration maybe?
Sure, okay. So, well, I can talk from my experience. Being abroad was awesome. Just not only work-wise, but as a personal experience. I would recommend it, definitely. I also had the chance to work for very nice companies in Germany, where I learned a lot from awesome colleagues. And yeah, I also made a lot of friends. So definitely, as a person, go abroad for some years. And work-wise, yeah, just find what makes you happy and go for it. There are people that enjoy more about animation and all those kind of cool stuff in the interface. Myself, I figured it out with time that what makes me excited is all this kind of overview of the application and how the different parts interact with each other. But yeah, there are a lot of fields. Even within Android development, you can find a lot of areas of expertise nowadays. So be it CI, CD, or wherever, and then you can just dive deep into the topic that you find your passion.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I also love you said that you have to, over time I figured out that, because it's true, we need to live and we need to explore, and I think our careers are so interesting that we get to play a lot. We get to play with cool technologies. It's moving very fast. It's never the same.
Yeah.
It can be stressful in the end. You have to learn your whole career. It's not like you finish your studies and then you forget about learning. It's not like that. It's more the contrary. But it's fun. Go out and explore and learn, and then eventually figure out what you want.
Yeah, exactly. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. If I now look back to the first job I got as a recent graduated student, I was making shitty code, and probably someone right now is blaming me for 1,000 mistakes, or have thrown already the whole code base and start from scratch all over again. But that's how we learn, right? Nobody's wise from the beginning.
Okay, great. So I think we're going to open now to questions from attendees. I think we can do it like this. So if you don't want to be on the camera on the recording, go ahead and type your question in the Q&A page.
There are actually 3 questions right now. So
okay, before we go into that, just
sure.
If you want to talk and be seen and talk to Rafa, then turn on your camera and take your turn.
Yeah, I will start. First of all, thank you so much, Rafa. It was very nice. I also had the opportunity to start a project since the scratch. And I worked with a friend that is working now in Sync. So I feel a little bit of pain against sync now. Just kidding. So basically, my question here is: I have the same doubt in our architecture with the clean architecture. Do you think that it's still necessary to use the use cases in MVVM? Because Google released a documentation with a proposal of a recommended architecture, and they basically remove the use cases completely, and the view model depends of the repository contractor.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I know what document you are talking about, but I've seen some examples, like the repositories also delivering the live data directly, and then you kind of get rid of whatever not Android. I'd say that's also a valid point. In our case, the main purpose of the use cases are kind of reusing logic, because if you need to perform some operation from different points of your application, then either you extract that to some other class and you inject that class to the view model, and we call that use case. But probably, that's the only advantage that I see, like reusing the operations among your application.
I also agree that bringing live data to repositories and even people goes to data source and so on, I don't agree with that. I try to isolate live data for the app module, but I think they remove the use case because most of the use cases are a simple call to the repository.
Yeah.
So, and in my case, I analyzed my use cases and it's mainly that. So why should I have another layer just to call the repository?
Yeah, it's a fair point. Depending on the use case, we have a lot of them that are simple, just calling to the repository. Sometimes we use some data transformation, but I think, you have a point. Maybe not every code has to go through the use case. It also depends on how you deal with async code in your view model. But I guess you can start a coroutine from within the view model instead of throwing into the use case.
Yeah, I was trying to collect some opinions because I'm trying to remove it, but I'm not 100% sure. So thank you for your feedback.
No problem. I'd say just reuse is the main thing that you might lose if you move the code into the view model.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions, or should I go through the ones written in the Q&A? Olmo, I see you.
I'm Olmo. You may remember me from Tapas in Malaga. Okay. First of all, thanks for the talk. It was really interesting. A lot of ideas to share. I'm glad you like the coroutine talk. I came back to it many times because sometimes I forget slight details and I go back to it. Okay, so I have just two quick questions. The first is, do you have UI tests in your code base actually, like Espresso or another instrumentation testing framework? And the other one is, if you have some sample code, like a small sample in a public repository to have a look and share ideas and maybe take ideas from. So that's it.
Thank you for the question, Solmo. For the first question, which was, what was the first question?
About the instrumentation test.
Instrumentation test, no, we don't have at this point any UI tests. We are planning to incorporate, of course, to Espresso, and even this. I saw your live streaming with Pedro regarding the shot and so on. I think it was called shot, right? So definitely something we will incorporate soon, but so far didn't get to that point. And about the public repository, as a company right now, we don't have. I have my GitHub with some projects, but I'm trying to remember if I have something regarding this architectural stuff. I'm not sure. I'll have to check, but I have some things regarding, side projects, more or less, where I learn. Because when I come out of job, I want to think about other things, and that's what I end up doing in GitHub, like a Flutter repository or whatever. But yeah, maybe we post something soon as well.
Okay, cool. Because actually, in my current code base, I'm also using all this stuff: coroutines, use cases, view models, all this stuff, and I'm trying to face this espresso testing with the coroutines in the middle and all this stuff mixed, and it's being a little bit challenging. So yeah, I wanted to see if other colleagues have examples or another points of view, because yeah, it's trying to find the best approach. Regarding Rafaela's question about use cases, because I agree with that, we have a lot of use cases which are just a call to the repository. So sometimes you think about if they are useful or not, if we need one more layer or not. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ali also commented here in the chat that I forgot that we also use the use cases to compose several calls to repositories. So in case you have an object in your domain that needs 2 different calls from different repositories, we do it in a use case, but that's also something not as simple as calling a repository, but 2 ones and then combining the results. So that's also maybe example.
We do the same, but mainly that logic is logic that could be from the view model, because it's logic that you need to represent information. So yeah, this is my doubt. I'm not 100% sure what really fits always in the use case or in the view model. So
yeah, it's also kind of sometimes a philosophical question. If it's something you need to present in your view, as you said, or is it something core of your domain? Like, is it gonna be always like this, or is it just because I'm presenting it this way? So that's kind of a philosophical question that you might ask yourself about.
So hey, if you have the link of that screencast with Pedro, could you please put it here in the chat? I think it will be useful for everybody.
Oh, I'm sad to say it is no longer available because Twitch hosts the video only for 60 days. So yeah, the other day I looked and it's no longer available. And I also used some background music. And it seems that you cannot use music on Twitch. So every video with music is automatically removed. So the other day I was about to find it and I found it was removed. Sad fact.
Okay, well, never mind. Thank you.
Okay, any other question from live cameras? Otherwise, I can read some of the others that we have. Someone asked, what is a feature module? Well, a feature module is basically a module inside your application, right? You can through Android Studio, for example, you get to create modules, and it is a module that has to do with a specific feature of your application. Like, let's say, open banking that I mentioned earlier. Every logic or every view that has to do with that feature, you would put it in that module, and we call it feature module. I hope that answers the question, or anyone or the person who asked can also raise the hand. There is another question. What criteria do you use to pick Jetpack library versions? You tend to keep with latest stable or go with beta? What pros and cons you find on each selection? Yeah, this is quite interesting question. A good question. As far as we can go, I'd say, like, if we need something that is beta, we normally go for it because it's already like a stable API. I am not able right now, from the top of my head, to name some libraries that we are using in beta. I know for example, for our tests, we have the annotation of experimental coroutines API to be able to leverage this run blocking test and whatever. But yeah, as I said, we try to keep us so updated. We don't update libraries just because of updating libraries so far, because we haven't had the time for that yet either. But if we see we have a new need and there is a library, there is an update that will help us, we go for it. So anyone else with a question? Doesn't seem like that. Let me check here. No more questions.
Okay. All right. So thank you.
I think that there is a new question over there.
Yeah, in the chat, yeah, I just saw. At first, you talk about Flutter. Do you think that it have future for apps, or do you think that native code is best option? Nice question as well. Yeah, I laugh because we have a lot of ongoing discussions within the team and the company. There are lovers and haters for Flutter and React Native and these kind of solutions. Myself, my opinion, I really like the developer experience for Flutter, to be honest. This whole reloading and the UI development cycle, for me, it's very convenient, and I think definitely it has some room in the application development. If it suits every case, we will have to see, but for sure there are apps that can be built with Flutter with no problem. Also, every native solution, like Chris Barker lately talked about Swift UI, very nice talk as well. And Android has its own Jetpack Compose, which is kind of going in the same paradigm for building UIs as Flutter has. So maybe native development will also gain that flexibility. Well, not flexibility, but this fun of building UI that currently, myself at least, I am missing. But yeah, I'd say Flutter is perfectly fine for some use cases. I know Ale is gonna hate me a little bit for saying this, but that's my opinion.
Right.
Okay. So I think there are no more questions, right, guys?
Okay. So hey, Rafa, thank you very much. I think it was an amazing session. We can end recording now, and we can stay a little bit more if you want to talk about anything. And we still got time. And we will be announcing our next session soon. We are trying to finalize it, so I won't spill the beans, but stay tuned. It will be again an online session. I don't know what's going to happen long term. I think nobody knows. But in terms of being, I like the meetups when we are together and we go for a drink. That's also a great interaction. But also, we can have international speakers much more easily. So maybe going forward, we will have a mix of, if things open up and we can have sessions together, we will have a mix. And in any case, I'm super interested about your opinion, so please do let me know.
Great. Regarding that, I have a suggestion for this Corona situation. Maybe we can have once in a month some kind of a coffee break to talk about Android, but something open. Doesn't mean that we need to prepare a presentation, and maybe suggest some subject, and we can just give examples saying, okay, I'm doing this in my project and have these blockers and these difficulties, something more open.
That's a great idea, Rafaela. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, thank you.
David, do you want to say something?
Well, this is my first meetup, so just would like to thank Rafa and all the team that is organizing this. I think I will enjoy more in the future.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining.
Mm-hmm. It's a pleasure.
Okay. So I think we're going to finish the recording now officially, and stay tuned for more news from us.